the tension with Tehran. Iran is threatening further action to breach the 2015 nuclear agreement if the U.S. does not relieve the sanctions that are in place, which have, in fact, impacted the Iranian economy. And that is one of the issues. The regime beginning to enrich uranium beyond the limits agreed in the nuclear accord. Now, Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson is warning that Tehran is prepared to ramp up its nuclear weapons program should it be necessary, he said. Vice President Mike Pence issued a stark warning to Iran yesterday. Watch.
Well, let me be clear. Iran should not confuse American restraint with a lack of American resolve. We will continue to oppose Iran's malign influence. We will continue to bring pressure on their economy. And under President Donald Trump, America will never allow Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon.
Joining me right now is Texas Congressman, House Armed Services Committee ranking member Mac Thornberry here. Good to see you, Congressman. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
How serious is this threat with Iran? Should the U.S. now be responding to these provocations?
Well, that's what Iran is trying to provoke. They are intentionally dialing up tensions to create a crisis in the hopes that they can divide the U.S. and Europe and that somebody will come rushing in with some sanctions relief just so they dial back the crisis that they created. And they've tried bombing tankers to see if that helps increase the price of oil. They have shot down a drone of the U.S., and now they're on the nuclear path just to see what sort of reaction they can get.
So where does this go? I mean, obviously, the president has said he doesn't want a war, but do you see military action necessary?
Well, it depends on what they do. If they attack U.S. troops, absolutely. And there has been information that that is one of the things they're considering, allowing their proxies to attack our troops in Iraq or elsewhere. Oh. So that is very significant. Again, I think Iran is following the North Korea playbook. Dial up the tensions, create a crisis, and hope that they can get some sanctions relief when everybody comes rushing in with relief that it's not as bad as you thought it could be. So for us, I think the key is stay close with Europe. And now there are indications that the Europeans are concerned about this increasing enrichment because that violates what they thought they were achieving in the nuclear agreement. Stay close with Europe and keep a strong military presence. I don't think it's a coincidence that these tensions started when we did not have a carrier presence in the Persian Gulf. So they're watching these things. Now we do. Now we have a stronger military presence, and I think that's good.
Wow. Okay. Well, it's been slow going for Europe, by the way.
No, absolutely.
They've been kicking and screaming, not wanting to separate businesses from Iran. Let me turn to defense spending and all of this, all of these pressures going on across the world. Later today, you're giving a speech on why a strong military is vital for economic growth. Tell me about defense spending. You've got a budget deadline coming up. Are we going to see another debt ceiling debate?
The debt ceiling has to be dealt with, and it's a forcing function to make Congress come to grips with the budget, the funding for the government for the next year. I suspect that'll be September. We could do it now if there were just the political will. Just to back up for a second, remember, defense spending was cut about 20% in the Obama years. We've made up about half of that. So we have not even gone back to make up the cuts that were made during the Obama years. Meanwhile, the world has gotten more dangerous. We see increased threats from China. We've been talking about Iran, North Korea, Russia. Terrorists have not gone away. So just like any other organization, what the Defense Department needs is some stability so that they can plan. If you're going to invest in new programs like lasers and hypersonics and artificial intelligence, you need to know what your budget is, and you need to be able to plan on it. And so hopefully we can get another 3% increase in defense spending. That's what the experts have told us we need just to stay even with Russia and China. That's the goal. But unfortunately, defense becomes a political football as people try to leverage it for spending in other areas.
How worried should we be that China apparently is ahead of us on AI, is ahead of us on some of these new innovative technologies and 5G?
Yeah, we should be very worried. Because they are targeting technologies that they think will hurt us. one of the areas is counter space, so they can knock down satellites. That's part of the reason that Congress and the President have come together to create a new space organization so we can do a better job. But you're right, AI, hypersonics, a number of these areas, China is actually leading us, and it's not just a competition, it's specific areas that they think will prevent us from defending ourselves and our allies. So it's very targeted, it's very smart, and we're scrambling to catch up.
You know, we look at the economic side of this dispute between the U.S. and China, but it's really the national security issues that are paramount here, and you're dealing. The U.S. is dealing with these national security issues with regard to China as the clock is ticking on the government facing a potential default. There's a new warning that the government runs out of borrowing power in early September. You just mentioned the debate on the debt ceiling. How are we going to communicate this to the Congress, to your colleagues, to make sure people understand the threat of national security that China represents? And to make sure that the budget issues go away?
Well, we do make it hard on ourselves. There's no question. And if you look at China, they have this full range of tools from military to economic and trade that they use for a designed, focused purpose. And we have trouble getting the Defense Department to talk to the State Department.
Exactly.
So we make it hard for ourselves. I don't think, though, that there's really any difference between the parties about the long-term threat that China poses. Both parties agree. The challenge we get is people on the other side of the aisle want to say, okay, I'll give you more for defense, but you got to give me more for housing, education, or some other social program. So it's using defense as a political football rather than national security on its merits straight up that present us the political problem in getting things done in Washington.
Let me switch gears and ask you about this report from the Washington Examiner reporting that Democratic Congressman Veronica Escobar is secretly sending staff into Mexico to coach asylum seekers. She's instructing them to act as if they cannot speak Spanish, for example. Now, Congresswoman Escobar responded to the claims over Twitter from the Washington Examiner, and she wrote this: "The Washington Examiner has published a fabricated story resulting in death threats against me and my staff. This hit piece is fueled by xenophobia and misinformation. But guess what, guys? These attacks won't deter me doing my job, upholding my oath, and pushing for accountability." Do you know if she is helping the asylum seekers?
I do not know. No, I don't know. I've heard of the reports, but I do not know whether that's happening. Any member of Congress has to be careful about obviously encouraging people to break the law and getting involved personally in foreign policy sorts of issues. So this is dangerous territory. I don't know if there's any truth in the allegations or not, personally, but it's a place where members of Congress need to be careful.
Are your colleagues now on the left admitting that this is a crisis? What do we need to do in terms of the border with regard to national security?
I think nearly everybody agrees it's a crisis, that we are overwhelmed at the border. And that's the reason that you saw Republicans and Democrats pass a border supplemental bill a couple weeks ago. Even though the progressive socialist wing of the Democratic Party was very critical of it, I think most people who are looking at the facts understand this is a crisis. But obviously, we're just helping alleviate a little of the symptoms. There needs to be greater attention paid in Central America. We've got to change our asylum laws to reduce the magnet that is drawing people here. And we've got to have more border security. It's this combination of things. I'll bet you could get most members of Congress in a room and 75% of what needs to be done they'd agree upon.
Do you think something can get done on those asylum laws and the asylum standards this year?
It could. The reason
it could, but will it?
I doubt it, because it's become a political football for both sides. And that's the tragedy. Number one, a problem's not getting solved. Number two, there are real human beings getting caught up in the political football nature of these immigration debates. Again, we could agree on a number of things that would make it better. Not solve everything, but we could make it better. Unfortunately, there are people on both sides who want to use it as a political football.
So, Congressman, right now, what do our viewers need to understand in terms of the most important risks?
The most important risk is that the United States would decide we're going to withdraw from engagement in the world and weaken our military, because our quality of life depends on a strong military and engagement. We can't backtrack.
Mac Thornberry, great to see you. Thanks so much, Congressman.